2022, and we are going to have a couple presentations today. We don't have a lot of council members here. We do have a lot of interested parties in the audience. I just want to remind everybody that part of the reason we've set up this committee is to make sure we get a complete library on the council website of videos and information, and so even without a lot of council members here, we're accomplishing the goal of getting this material into a central location for council members and the public to review as we go through the process. So with that, we've got council members Roten and Parker from the committee here, and council members Nash and Swope are here also. This committee isn't voting on anything, so we don't need a quorum to proceed. Hopefully we do get one more and accomplish a quorum, however. So going forward, item 1 on the agenda is to talk about the upcoming meeting schedule, and I will tell you all that the next 2 meetings are on August 18 and August 31, both at 4:30, both in the chamber. At the August 18th meeting, it will be a recap of some components of today's presentation, particularly around what first-class condition means, and then we'll get some further information about the study that was done about stadium condition 5 years ago, as well as what information's been shared with the city more recently, and also the status of the condition report that we funded in the budget. So that'll be August 18th. It'll give about another 3 weeks to develop that information a little bit more. On August 31, we're asking the team in the mayor's office, team or the mayor's office, team and mayor's office, however they want to do it, to come in and give us a status report about where the deal is and what kind of pacing we should expect for the months to follow. So that's agenda item 1. Agenda item number 2 is a stadium area land ownership and use discussion. We've got Director Lucy Kemp from Planning. She's going to give us a presentation and then go to the actual Planning Commission meeting, which we appreciate. And Anna Greider is here if any questions come up afterwards. So Lucy, it's all yours.
Thank you, Councilman Mendez, and to all the council members here. Good afternoon. Thanks so much for having me, Lucy Kempf with the Planning Department. Thank you for acknowledging Anna Greider, who's managing this project, and also Rochelle Albright is here with us with communications, and Matt Loftus from MDHA is here as well, and MDHA has been a good neighbor to the project and partner, so I'm grateful that they're here. So I've been asked to give a sort of just the facts, ma'am, overview of existing land uses, existing zoning on the East Bank. So to begin with, this slide that you see here orients us to the East Bank in the context of the broader city. And as you can see, it's really located in the heart of the city, directly across from downtown, as well as neighborhoods of Edgefield, McFerrin Park, East Nashville. You know, if you look up at River North here to the north, oh, it's not showing up on the screen here, I'm sorry. River North is where Oracle is developing, as well as a lot of important projects on Dickerson Road in Councilman Parker's district. And then over here, we've got MDHA projects. And then, of course, you can see across the river on the western side, 2nd Avenue redevelopment around the recovery area. And so there's really a lot of activity going on around and in the context of the East Bank. And then, of course, within the East Bank, we have the 17-acre truck stop site, which is in the process of exploring redevelopment, as well as conversations around Nissan Stadium. And so over the last year, the department has undertaken a review of the land use and planning around the East Bank. It's about 338 acres, so it's a really significant amount of property that we are investigating. And primarily, we want to understand how to accomplish a more organized vision for this area, something that responds to community needs and interests in its redevelopment. Today, all of you are familiar. It's really covered in surface parking lots, private industrial development, and of course the Titan Stadium. But we are envisioning a transformation of this area with multimodal access, parks and green spaces at the centerpiece of that vision, and that's been the purpose of our work. It's important to understand some of the formidable obstacles, physical obstacles that have been created in and around the East Bank, and that must be part of our solution. So on the east side, you can see the interstate, and then on the west, many see the river actually as an obstacle rather than something that can bring people together, and we would really like to see the river as something that can bring folks together in our community. These black sort of hatched lines in the center are not conceptual. This is actually what the north-south road network is today, which creates a very uncomfortable environment in and around the East Bank. And when you see the zoning slide in a moment, I hope you'll remember this, because in some parts of the East Bank, the zoning is already fairly intensely entitled and does not have the infrastructure that you would expect that would support a mixed-use neighborhood. So that's something that we have been evaluating. You see the existing access points here in peach. And so part of our understanding of the East Bank is how we can better connect it into the fabric of our city in a way that it's not today, because it does sort of function almost as an island. So there's a range of existing zoning districts on the East Bank. It's dominated by MUI and MUIA. For those of you who work in the zoning space, these are mixed-use intensive areas. It's about 170 acres. These are some of the most intense mixed-use zoning districts that we have today. Midtown is a good example where you have that kind of zoning, and that's existing. And so I say that because in my mind, it's not really a question of whether the East Bank develops, it's how, and how much we want to manage it, and how much we want to ensure that we have community-driven goals that guide and govern that growth in a thoughtful way. And so in our mind, it's really important to guide this work. I'm happy to answer specific questions on these, but other zoning districts include IG and IR, as well as SP, where the truck stop site is located, which is a design-based standard specific to that site. So the East Bank itself includes both public and private land. We've been focusing predominantly on the public infrastructure needed as building blocks for a great neighborhood, right? And so we've been engaging both private and public owners equally in that work. But just to hone in on some of the Metro-owned property, you see that we have MDHA. It's not Metro-owned, but a sort of a publicly owned entities. We have MDHA here in this peach, Parks Board, Sports Authority, and the Juvenile Court in Aqua. And so there's a range of different ownership characteristics for the East Bank. And so that's the conclusion of the slides and a brief overview of some of the existing land use and zoning conditions, but I'm happy to answer any questions, or Anna Greider is available to answer questions as needed. Thank you.
Any of y'all have questions about the presentation? All right. right. Seeing none, then we will thank you, Lucy, Director Kempf, and Anna, thanks for being here. There may be questions for you at the end, so appreciate you sticking around, Ms. Greider. And Director Kempf, you can go off to planning. Appreciate you being here. And we'll get the other presentation teed up next. While we do that, the next agenda item is a presentation by Director and Special Counsel to the Metro Council, Margaret Darby. This is, the agenda item is 1990s Stadium Deal legislation, referendum, and a discussion of first-class condition. It's all yours, Director Darby.
Give me a second. Get back to that screen we looked at earlier. Perfect, thank you. That was our, can you hear me in the microphone? That was our newest employee to the council office. His name is Matt Purvis. And I've learned today that he is pretty good at PowerPoint. So, welcome. So unfortunately, you've just seen the end of all of the pretty pictures that we have for the East Bank. Can you hear me? Is this better? Okay. So we just saw the end of all the pretty pictures. We will be moving into the text component of our presentations for today. I've been asked to review the contracts, and so it can get pretty dry and dense. So we'll get started with a little bit of background. So way back in 1995, the Sports Authority was created, and the primary purpose for the Sports Authority to be created was to deal with financing and operating sports facilities. Around the time that the Sports Authority was, being created, Mayor Bredesen was in talks with Bud Adams, and he was in talks with Gaylord to try to get professional sports teams here. And so he was looking at, an NFL team, an NBA team, and then also in discussions about an NHL team. I think we know which ones actually came to Nashville, and we're excited to have them here, I think, at the time. One of the things that I learned going through this process was, this is something I didn't know, and I've been working on Sports Authority issues for many, many years now. But one thing I didn't know was that in 1995, that the council actually was presented with the letter agreement between the Houston Oilers and the mayor's office. And that letter agreement had all of the general, really forest level terms about what the agreements would be between the parties, between the team and the Sports Authority and the city. And I don't have the actual resolution here for you, but you can go find it. It's RS 95-30, and I think it's pretty interesting to go back and read that. It's a little bit of some good history for us. The Sports Authority is a nonprofit corporation. It's also a public instrumentality of the Metropolitan government, meaning that, we ask them to to move forward with the financing, and then they undertake that. It's really a kind of a back and forth working relationship with the Sports Authority to get to get these financing deals done. The Sports Authority is technically the landlord for the 1996 stadium lease. Back back in 1996. So that's the 1995 legislation. Back in 1996, there was a little bit more legislation to actually get a lot of the agreements and the funds issued that would go towards constructing the stadium. Resolution 96-153, approved by the council. This was the initial resolution to issue up to $80 million in general obligation bonds. These bonds were going to be used to construct the facility, to acquire property. As we know, all initial resolutions for general obligation bonds are required to be published in the paper, and then the citizens have a time period within which they can file a petition to have a referendum vote so that the citizens can determine whether or not bonds are to be issued. Well, that happened in 1996, and enough petitions were filed in order to hold that referendum vote.
Director Darby, can I interrupt with a question?
Sure.
So I just want to reemphasize or ask the question. So that ability to have a potential referendum, as I understand it, relates to general obligation bonds only and not revenue bonds.
That's correct.
So, and this is a question I've heard from people in the community. So for the upcoming deal, if it's as advertised where it's Sports Authority revenue bonds, the whole idea of there is no opportunity to trigger a referendum in any way, shape, or form for that, as I understand it.
That's correct. The state law only requires this for this opportunity for general obligation bonds.
All right, thank you.
At the same time that the initial, shortly after that the initial resolution for the bond issues were presented to the council, council also passed Resolution 96-178, which was the authority to actually issue the debt and to go forth and to sell it. But of course, that was conditioned upon the referendum happening. Also, as required by state law, the council, when you go through this referendum process, the council has to do another resolution that actually calls for the referendum election, and they did that through 96-206. On May 7th, 1996, that referendum election was held. The results came back that it came in about 59% to 41% in favor of issuing the debt for the stadium. There was a, I don't know how many of you remember it, but there was a pretty big campaign, both for and against the issuance of the bonds with signs all over town. This resolution 96-267, acknowledges the results of that referendum and then also goes forward to substitute the prior resolution and authorize the sale of the bonds. Round about the same time, the Sports Authority was going through their approval process, and that has to also come back before the council. At the time, they brought an ordinance that was Ordinance 96-222 that approved the issuance of the revenue bonds up to $65 million. That also approved the indenture, which is kind of the agreement that lays out all of the terms for the bond issue. The Metropolitan government is a party to that indenture. And Metro, promised and is obligated to deliver the pilot payments. There's a pilot with pilot means payment in lieu of tax agreement with the Water Services Department. They pay over $4 million a year that is dedicated towards paying debt service on the bonds, the revenue bonds. And parking revenues would be paid over, and the Metro is also obligating itself that to the extent that those payment sources were insufficient to pay the debt service combined with the rent and other taxes that were available, that these bonds would be backed with the non-tax revenues of the Metropolitan government. I think that you all have heard about non-tax revenues being used as a kind of a backstop for revenue bond revenue bonds. And the non-tax revenues are typically things like fees, and other types of taxes, anything that is not a real property tax. There was also an additional revenue bond from the Sports Authority that was approved by the council, and that was for an additional $15 million. All of that went towards the 65 and the 15, all of that went towards the construction of the facility. And, more legislation to get the deal done. There was another ordinance that approved the intergovernmental agreement between the Sports Authority and Metro. And this is the agreement where the parties both agree they're going to issue their debt, they're going to acquire the land, construct the facility. Metro is going to collect taxes and fees and turn those over as necessary. And that once the stadium has been fully constructed, that the Sports Authority was agreeing to take title to it and to, operate it. Which brings us to the stadium lease, because the Sports Authority does not directly operate the stadium. I think we all know this. The stadium lease was executed also in 1996, and the parties are the Sports Authority and Cumberland Stadium. They've changed their name since 1996. The first lease year, or the substantial completion date, was July 30th, 1999. That comes into play several times throughout the lease agreement. I'm not going to dive into all the times that comes into play, but it's an important date to note. The initial term of the agreement goes through the 2028 season. Cumberland Stadium has two options to extend that lease. The first one is a one-year extension period, and then after that, they can extend for another 10 years. So conceivably, the team could exercise the option to go through 2039.
Can I pause you there too? Because this is a topic that I've heard different folks out in the community have expressed different views of this, and so I just want to be clear. The option is unilateral, up to the team. Metro has no say over whether the lease ends on time or after one extra year or after the additional 10-year extension, right?
That's correct.
And as of right now, the options haven't been exercised, but it's believed the team has indicated an intent to do that at some point in the future.
That I don't know about. I haven't seen any letter indicating an intent to exercise. The team has to exercise its first option 18 months before the end of the term. So there's still some time left.
All right, thank you.
More general terms of the lease, the use of the facilities. Generally, the team has the exclusive right up to 30 days. That includes their home games. They typically will work with the Sports Authority and the other tenant, which is Tennessee State University, with regard to scheduling those dates. And then they have the right to, designate other dates as well with under certain conditions. The lessor, the Sports Authority, can use the facility for civic events. Generally, those are nonprofit type events, or the entity is a nonprofit entity. And then Tennessee State University also has an agreement to use the stadium, and they can play their home games there. And I believe they play their homecoming game there every year. The rent is $3 million per year. That can be offset by other expenses that may come up that are designated in the lease, but it can't be less than $2.2 million per year. More general terms, the lessee is obligated to pay operating expenses, the lessee is obligated to pay maintenance expenses generally. There are some insurance requirements. The Sports Authority is obligated to carry general property insurance. This is something that comes up, I think, pretty much annually during our budget process with the question of why does the Sports Authority have such a large budget for such a small office? And it's because primarily they're paying this insurance premium. This and the other facilities that they oversee. Let's see, taxes. Lessor is obligated for the property taxes, and to the extent that the lessee has any sort of tax, whether it be if there was a leasehold tax that was assessed to them, or something like there's a ticket tax that is charged, and if the ticket tax goes over a certain amount, that amount above the threshold would be considered a reimbursable tax that the lessee would be able to offset their rent with. Revenues and related rights, things like naming rights, advertising rights, broadcasting rights, those all are in the hands of the team. And they are also entitled to generate most of the revenues from the facility. So, capital improvements. The lessor is generally obligated to cause the capital projects for which it is responsible for the expenses to be implemented and completed as promptly as possible. Typically, this is done in cooperation with the Titans organization. They will usually undertake the projects, and the Sports Authority as the lessor would be obligated to pay those expenses. And I've got several slides here to go into a lot more detail, so we'll probably get to a lot of the fun stuff that people are interested in. Let's see, the lessor is obligated to pay $1 million a year into a capital fund. That capital fund is to be used for to pay the capital project expenses. The capital project's expenses are due even if the amount in the capital fund isn't sufficient to cover those capital project expenses. Every year, when we go through our budget process, the council puts in $1 million into the capital fund. That is something that was agreed to in between the Sports Authority and the Metropolitan government back in 1996, that Metro would provide that aid in supporting that capital fund. So we provide that $1 million annually. The lessor, the Sports Authority, is obligated to pay only its share of improved item expenses. There's a definition up there about what those are. And the lessor is obligated to pay only for its voluntary improvements. Voluntary improvement expenses, those cover things like if you go over to the stadium, you'll see some planters on the, I think they surround the whole stadium, but I know they're on the north and south side, and they've got the Titans logo on that. That was a voluntary expense. The Titans ended up paying for that particular feature themselves, as well as I believe recently they put in a stage area on the south side, something to have some pregame entertainment. That was also something that would have been a voluntary expense that the Titans would have been obligated to pay for, and not the lessor. As I mentioned earlier, the lessor and lessee are required by the lease to cooperate with one another. There's some various things that they have to do that are on the screen that how they cooperate with one another. Every month, the Titans provide the Sports Authority with a what is termed a communication tool that lists out all of the projects that have been completed, the projects that are underway and in process for being completed, as well as projects that are anticipated or on the foreseeable horizon for the facility. The lessor, something that is important to note, is the lessor is not obligated to pay for luxury suite improvements. That is something that is, those are capital improvements that are borne by the team, unless the improvement is something that is structural in nature, in which case the lessor would be responsible for that. So a capital project expense definition is at the top of there, and I'm going to read this. It's all expenses other than improved item expenses incurred with respect to a capital project that are required to be made in order to cause all or any part of the facilities to be in a first-class condition. The first-class condition is something that is talked about a lot, and I'll get to that on some slides coming up soon. A capital project can be a single or a series of improvements to the facility, or it can be a single improvement to stadium equipment. They have to, the improvements have to be greater than a threshold value that changes annually. There's a factor in the lease that allows that threshold to go higher. The last time I checked, and I think it's a little bit higher now than the last time I checked, but it was about, for a single improvement, it's a little over $3,500, and for a series of improvements, it would be over $24,000. So, so those numbers are a little bit higher at this point. It started at the beginning of the lease, those threshold amounts were $1,500 and $10,000, so it has increased some over the years. The capital project also has to be classified as a capital expense by generally accepted accounting principles. This generally means that the expense increases the life or the future service of the facility, or whatever it is within the facility that's being improved. And specifically excluded from this is the doming of the stadium. The lessor is also obligated to pay for stadium equipment. This is basically things that aren't nailed down. It's personal property that would go with the stadium. As I think I said before, the lessor is not obligated to pay for the lessee's voluntary improvements or the improved item expenses. So first-class condition, what does that mean? There is a definition in the lease. It means that the improvement it must be done because it needs to be in compliance with applicable law. Think about fire code type requirements, things of that nature. It also means being in good condition and repair, normal wear and tear accepted. Whenever I hear normal wear and tear accepted, my mind immediately goes to carpet. So, you walk on the carpet, you're going to have normal wear and tear. That's not something that would have to be done in order to keep something in a first-class condition. C is probably really important here too, having the level of improvements and new technology that from time to time are found in a reasonable number of comparable facilities. What is reasonable? That might be open for interpretation to determine what reasonable number of comparable facilities are. But you also might ask, what is a comparable facility? Well, that is also a defined term in the lease. It means a first-class sporting and entertainment stadium that is comparable to the facilities. So we use the phrase comparable to the facilities to describe what a comparable facility is. But one might think of something that, a football stadium that looks like our stadium, something similar to that. Something that's of similar age, that is defined as either 10 years before or 10 years after the construction of our stadium. So that's a 20-year period. And it's located in a major metro area of the U.S., and this can also include other football stadiums. So the definition of this also deems, so in 1996, they decided we're going to say that these particular stadiums are deemed comparable facilities. So we'll look at them every time we're looking at this definition. And there's a list there that you will notice a good deal of those are actually ballpark facilities, which is kind of interesting. Might be worth noting, the Olympic Stadium in Atlanta is no longer used as a professional sporting stadium. A college stadium. Other comparable NFL stadiums, and this is looking at that 20-year period. This is a list that I've put together just by looking up the stadiums that were built and came online in that 20-year period. that were in major metropolitan areas and also don't have, are not domed. They don't have that roof. The other part of the first-class condition is that it talks about improvements in new technology that from time to time are found at a reasonable number of comparable facilities. So we've seen the definition of comparable facilities, so you also have to examine what improvements in new technology are. So this should also have the word improvements in it, but with respect to improvements in new technology that perform a completely new function, rather than being a replacement, upgrade, or enhancement, it's limited to the level of improvements in new technology that you would find at a majority of comparable facilities. So you have to look at this as we're looking at this to determine or to think about what the lessor, the sports authority, is obligated to pay for. Remember, kind of go back to what a capital project expense is. The lessor is responsible to pay for capital project expenses. And so this would lend itself towards that definition.
So generally, first-class condition, setting aside technology, is referring basically to a, quote, reasonable number of comparable facilities, and for new technology, it has to be a majority of comparable facilities?
Yeah, it would be new improvements in technology that kind of were not, that perform a completely new function, yes.
So the hologram projector?
A hologram projector was probably not around in 1996. I think the main gist of this is that we are not required to pay for things that, are kind of early adopter type technology. So if, the new thing was to have a screen in the back of every seat so that you could look at that screen while you watch the football game, that it would not be something that we would be required to pay for until half, I guess, a majority of the comparable facilities also had done it, and then we can jump on that train and go forward. Moving on to the default section. So a lessee or lessor can terminate the lease within 30 days notice of a default. A default would be a failure to pay when due, sums owed by the party after 30 days notice, a failure of a party to observe or perform any sort of agreement or covenant or obligation under the lease. There's a 60-day cure period after the 30-day notice period. Sorry, there's a 60 days on the failure to observe, 30 days on the failure to pay. That is all I have for the lease agreement. There's also a development agreement which contains some terms that are important to the relationship between the parties. This was executed in 1996. Metro is a party to this agreement. Metro is not a party to the lease agreement. And the team entity is also a party to this agreement. It generally addresses the construction and the development of the stadium. Most of the obligations here in this agreement have been complied with. The stadium was built, it's under operation. Some of the things that are important to note in this agreement is that, the team has covenanted to play all of its home games during the operating period. The operating period is from the 1999 date through the end of the team lease date. And then there are there's relief if the team were to breach that portion of the development agreement. The development agreement, like I said, most of the things in it have already happened or are continuing to happen, but Metro is obligated to acquire the stadium site, construct the facilities, There was a component where the state had to construct some infrastructure improvements, maintain insurance, some general things of that nature, contribute the necessary funds to maintain the capital fund on behalf of the Sports Authority. And let's see, the Sports Authority, they're obligated to execute the stadium lease. That has happened. They were obligated to cause a reimbursement fee for the team relocation expenses. So that's pretty much the gist of the development agreement. Then there's the one other agreement I mentioned early on that was that intergovernmental agreement, and most of the things that are required to have happened there have happened as well, like issuing the bonds, acquiring the land, constructing the stadium, but also Metro has to administer the revenues from the sales tax and make sure that those are delivered to the Sports Authority in order to pay debt service. And that brings me to the conclusion 20 slides later.
All right, let me ask a couple, and then we'll dive in with everybody else. The entity that leases from the Sports Authority, is that Cumberland Sports Inc.? Is that the name of it?
Yes.
And just for clarity for everybody, that's not the team. And they sublease to the team, I believe?
I don't have an answer to that question.
I think it's one of those documents in that little book you got there. So maybe we can check on that, but I think that entity subleases to TSU and to the team is what I think happens. I mention that just because I think we can expect a similar arrangement where it's not just the team, that there's probably some other entity that is related to the team that will actually lease from the Sports Authority. And then the other thing, I'll open it up to everybody else. Councilman Roten.
Thanks, Chair. I was just curious as far as the infrastructure, and you might have covered some of this, but as far as the stadium itself, when you get into like water and the roads surrounding the stadium, is it Metro has to keep that up? And if so, how far, or if the team does, how far out does it go that they have to keep that up?
The roads would be maintained by Metro. The parking lots are maintained by Cumberland and by Sports Authority.
Okay, so all the parking lots are kept up by the Cumberland. Okay. And so if we were to move
and the Sports Authority, they kind of split some of those costs.
Okay. So anything with infrastructure, if there was a new stadium one day and we moved the stadium, infrastructure's there, but as far as who takes care of what would have to be in the new agreement, is that correct?
Presumably, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Parker.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of small ones and then like a larger one, if that's all right, Director Darby. You said that non-tax revenue is what will cover the shortfall for revenue bonds that don't perform or don't bring in as much revenue to cover the debt. How much do we typically spend covering revenue bond shortfalls with non-tax revenue?
I don't have an answer to that question, but I can find out for you.
Thank you. The other, when you went over the extension options, you mentioned that there are 2 extension options. Did I hear you correctly that the 1 year must be extended in order for the 10-year to be available?
Yes.
Okay, and thank you. And they must be exercised within 18 months of the term ending, but they could be exercised at any point prior to that 18 months. So there's nothing in the lease that says they couldn't extend tomorrow, just to clarify.
Yes, I would read the lease that way.
Thank you. Okay, and then the big question I have, and maybe should have emailed to allow you to prepare for this, and if that's the case, then you can follow up with us. But so there's been a lot of talk about how the East Bank will develop as a whole, and the 90 acres that encompasses the lease area right now that Director Kempf went over. Can you give us a sense of like how that could develop under the present lease, because I'm curious, I know that we must maintain like X number of parking. I know that there have been some restrictions to what areas can be redeveloped under the current lease with amendments, but there is a lot of stuff in there about like setting aside parcels and Metro developing those or whoever developing those. I guess as someone who's probably much more adept at reading this stuff than I am, can you give us just a sense of what could happen development-wise there under the present lease?
You're right that I will have to go back and look at the lease to see how I can answer, if I can answer that question. Yeah.
And Councilman Parker, would you mind submitting that question to Ms. Godin in the office so we can make sure, because that's an important question, and we need to make sure to capture that with the other questions we've got?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Anything else?
I may have something else, but that's it for now. Thank you.
All right. Council Member Swope.
Thank you, Chairman Mendez. And while I'm not officially part of this committee, I do appreciate the opportunity to ask a question. And thank you for being here, Director Darby. And this is going to be an innocuous question, I know. I can just forewarn you. But as I understand it, we did a 2017 study. And in that study, we hired consultants. And this relates to the definition of first-class condition, right? As I understand this lease, and I actually have taken the time to read this incredibly long document, a dome facility can be considered a comparable facility, even though we can't or we're not mandated to put a dome on it. So my question is did the 2017 study actually include dome stadiums as it relates to first-class condition of similar stadiums, similar size stadiums, I guess is the best way to ask the question?
From what I recall from the 2017 study, you're talking about the facility assessment study? Yes. From what I recall of that study, and maybe this was just the way that I had looked at it, I had not looked at it from that perspective, from whether or not they addressed the first-class condition. I believe that they were just doing, that VSG was just doing an assessment of the facility, the systems in the facility to determine what types of systems were in there and the life of those systems and when they might need to be replaced. So I don't believe, and I would have to go back and look at it, but I'm not sure that they were looking at it from the lease perspective as much as they were looking at it from just here's a building. Yeah. Here's what's in it, and here's what, future maintenance and repairs and improvements and replacements might look like. Yeah,
and I guess what prompted this question was I noticed that most of the comparable sites are baseball stadiums.
The ones that are deemed,
which are considerably smaller.
The ones that are deemed comparable in the lease, that back in 1996 they decided, that's what we want to definitely look at those stadiums.
Okay, well, thank you.
Thanks, Councilmember. Anybody else? All right. Then thank you, Director Darby. I want to remind everybody that we are open for questions from council members about anything related to anything for the whole process. We've got about 2 pages worth of questions already from folks that cover a lot of topics. And I think because we've got 3 weeks until the next meeting on August 18th, I think I'm going to let the questions accumulate maybe for another week or so, and then try to work with the council office to see who can best answer the questions, because I'm sure the office will rely on some other departments for some of the questions. So please, everybody, continue to send in questions. I can tell a couple of the questions are community members have put a council member up to the question. Feel free to do that too. Let's get them all on the table and get answers online. Questions are welcome. Yes, Councilmember Toombs.
Thank you, Chair. Are those questions posted
There are no answers yet.
Okay, but are the questions themselves
The
posted
questions
somewhere?
aren't posted yet. I just saw a first set of them yesterday, and I think I'm just going to let them accumulate for another week and then try to work with the office to figure out who can best answer them. And we're going to group very similar questions. All right. Unless anybody else has something for the good of the order, then we'll be adjourned. Let me say a little bit about the website that we're still in the process of building. If you Google East Bank Stadium Committee, the page for the committee will come up. It is the council office has been working with ITS about exactly what the format's going to be. There will be a section set up by meeting where you can just click on a meeting date and it'll go to another page that has the agenda, any presentations, and a link to the video. And then separately, we are going to attempt to organize information by topic after we get further into this. And so I know we're trying to find people where they are. Some people say, hey, I remember at the end of July there was some presentation, I want to find that. They can go the meeting route, the organization by meeting, and if somebody wants to look at facilities reports once they're posted, hopefully there'll be a topic for that. So we're trying to design it so people can find information a couple different ways, and it'll be, like I mentioned last time, it'll take a couple meetings for us to get some content and make sure it's organized well. I'm happy to get feedback on how it's organized once you see it in a few meetings down the road. So with that, if there's nothing else from anybody, we'll be adjourned, and we'll be back on August 18th at 4:30 here. Thanks, everybody.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information on this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.